Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. So you got to sing. Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivaradhari Jai Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Pradikacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad Divine Grace. Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. And Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Pradikacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad. His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavina Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhaktavinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. So I want to apologize for my extended absence from the morning program. I've got to keep my foot up because of my sprain. I've seriously sprained it, and I have to massage it while I'm doing my rounds. I don't think I could do that when I'm sitting in the temple. So, but I should be back soon. It's getting better. So, I'm back. I'm right back. And tonight we'll have class too. I want to keep those good. Okay. Narayanam namaskritya narang chaiva narottamam Deving Saraswati Vyasam Dato Jayamadirit. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashtapraresha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtaki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 15th day of November 2021 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We are in Canto 5, The Creative Impetus, Chapter 7, The Activities of King Bharat, text number 14. Uh-oh, not written, huh? Okay, before we proceed. Oh, yeah, so we have... Hopefully you have devices. All right, just give me a second here. Paro Rajaha Savitur Jatavedo Devasya Bhargo Manasedam Jajana Suretasadaha Punar Avishya Chaste Hangsam Gridhranam Nrishad Ringiram Imaha Parodajak Sabatur Jatavedo Devasya Bhargo Manasedam Jajana Suretasada Punaravishya Chaste Hangsam Gridhranam Nishadringiram Imaha. It's a little irregular. Padorajak Sabatur Jatavedo Devasya Bhargo Manasedam Jajana Suretasada Punaravishya Chaste Hangsam Gridhranam Nishadvingiram Nimaha. Parorajak Sabatur Jatavedo Devasya Bhargo Manasedam Jajana Suretasada Punaravishya Chaste Hangsam Gridhranam Nrishadringiram Vimaha. Parorajak Sabatur Jatavedo Devasya Bhargo Manasedam Jajana Suretasada Punaravishya Chaste Hangsam Gridhranam Nrishadringiram Vimaha. Parorajak Sabatur Jatavedo Devasya Bhargo Manasedam Jajana Suretasada Punaravishya Chaste Hangsam Gridhranam Nrishadringiram Vimaha. Parorajak Savitur Jatavedo Devasya Bhargo Manasedam Jajana Suretasada Punaravishya Chaste Hangsam Gridhranam Nrishadringiram Namaha. Zoomland? Oh no, I'm sorry. Dimitri. Parorajak Savitur Jatavedo Devasya Bhargo Manasedam Jajana Suretasada Punaravishya Chaste Hang Sang Ridhanam Rishing Ringaram Namaha. Distinctly improved since I was absent. Anyone from Zoom land? Not this morning. Okay.
Raja Shabukur Jata Vedo
Pura Rajak Sapato Jata Vedo
Deva Shubhargo Manishidam Jajana
Devasya Bhargo Manasedang Jajana
Shurita Shava Punar Avishya Kaste
Sureta Sarak Punarabhishya Chaste
Hamsam Kridanam Nishad Yungunam Ima
Hang Sang Gridhanam Mishid Ringiram Namaha. Paraha Rajaha. Para Raja? Yeah? No? Beyond the mode of passion. Situated in the pure mode of goodness. Savituhu. Of the one who illuminates the whole universe. Jata Vedaha. From which all the devotees' desires are fulfilled. Devasya, of the Lord. Bhargaha, the self-effulgence. Manasa, simply by contemplating. Idam, this universe. Jajana, created. Suretasa, by spiritual potency. Adaha, this created world. Punaha, again. Avishya, entering. Chaste, sees or maintains. Hangsam, the living entity. Gridhanam, desiring for material enjoyment. Nrishat, to the intelligence. Ringiram, to one who gives motion. Imaha, let me offer my obeisances. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is situated in pure goodness. He illuminates the entire universe and bestows all benedictions upon His devotees. The Lord has created this universe from His own spiritual potency. According to His desire, the Lord entered this universe as the Supersoul, and by virtue of His different potencies, He is maintaining all living entities desiring material enjoyment. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the Lord, who is the giver of intelligence. Purport. The predominating deity of the sun is another expansion of Lord Narayana, who is illuminating the entire universe. The Lord enters the hearts of all living entities as the Supersoul, and He gives them intelligence and fulfills their material desires. This is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. Sarvasya chaham hridisannivishtaha. I am sitting in everyone's heart. Bhagavad Gita 15:15. As the Supersoul, the Lord enters the hearts of all living entities. As stated in the Brahma Samhita 5:35, Andantarasta padamana chayantarastham. He enters the universe and the atom as well. In the Rig Veda, the predominating deity of the sun is worshipped by this mantra. Dheya sada savitri mandala madhya varti narayanaha sadasijasana sannivishtaha. Narayan sits on his lotus flower within the sun. By reciting this mantra, every living entity should take shelter of Narayan, just as the sun rises. According to modern scientists, the material world rests on the sun's effulgence. Due to the sunshine, all planets are rotating and vegetables are growing. We also have information that the moonshine helps vegetables and herbs grow. Actually, Narayan within the sun is maintaining the entire universe. Therefore, Narayan should be worshipped by the Gayatri mantra or the Rig mantra. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purpose of the 5th canto, 7th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Activities of King Bharat. Om Jnana Timurandasya Jnanandana Shalakya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So this is a prayer that's being offered by King Bharat, who's retired to Pulaha Ashram in the Himalayas to perform devotional service. And he's performing devotional service after having purified his heart, as explained, if you remember, through years and years, 10 million years of his rule, offering all kinds of sacrifices and worshiping the Lord in that way, and maintaining the kingdom that he was given by his father when his father retired, Lord Rishabdev, and very responsibly. And so that at a certain point, now what's interesting to me is always fascinating, because there's a verse later on that we'll read about how King Bharat, he retired at a very young age, right? Left his young wife and everything, just as one, after excreting waste, leaves it, and went to perform devotional service, right? But it says that he was king for 10 million years. So I don't know what age he was living in. We'll figure that out at one point. Because it certainly wasn't the last Dwapara Yuga or the Treta Yuga. But in any case, he was still youthful when he retired, and he went to Pulasha Ashram, and he was meditating on the Lord, and described some of his meditation here. This is a mantra he's offering. And he's meditating on the Lord as the creator and maintainer here in the form of the sun, Surya Dev, and Narayan in his expansion, Surya. And so this is his meditation, but it's described that, as we'll read, he's getting more and more absorbed in love of God, love of Krishna. And he gets to the point of bhava. And as we'll read in this fascinating chapter to come, he had a fall down because he developed this attraction for a fawn. Fawns are commonly used to attract. I mean, it's like one of the most heartwarming creatures, right? The deer is already attractive, then the fawn, the helpless fawn, they make movies out of it, cartoons, isn't it? So I'm not going to get into that right now, but we see that from this passage and this purport, we see how advanced he was in reducing I was reviewing some of the previous verses, and one of the verses, they're all prose except for this one. How by his continued sacrifice and renunciation and meditation, he's becoming more and more averse to material attraction, and more full of love of Krishna, love of Godhead. And this is a principle that is universal in the practice of bhakti, is that we're not sitting meditating in Pulaka Ashram and meditating on the Lord as the maintainer of everything and performing these severe sacrifices. But the principle is the same, that we have been given by Lord Chaitanya and his followers very systematically, the Goswamis, and his wonderful line, Srila Prabhupada, is a systematic way that we can more and more absorb our mind in Krishna and his activities and his service through all the senses and the mind and the intelligence and everything that we have. And simultaneously, without trying a separate endeavor, becoming more and more detached from attraction to matter, which has been our material disease since time immemorial. Srila Prabhupada describes, and Lord Chaitanya describes in his teaching to Sanatana Goswami, how the living entity, when we turn our attention away from Krishna, out of envy really, and try to be absorbed in the material energy, in Krishna's dualities of the material energy, then we get covered. This is what Maya is all about. We get covered by forgetfulness. And we forget our entire nature, we forget Krishna, we forget everything about that, and we become absorbed in trying to achieve happiness through the interaction of the senses, the mind, and intelligence with this material energy. And this is called material life. Now, Srila Prabhupada says in the 9th canto, this was a real revelation because, that was, I wrote that at the end of 76, I think he was finishing the 9th canto. How when the living entity first falls from the spiritual world, this is in the purport, he first becomes Brahma. And so obviously not every Brahma goes back to Godhead. Right? We have the idea that our Brahma, this Brahma, he's the head of our Sampradaya, and the Brahma who had the Brahma Vimohan Leela. But he's going back. And those who are on the planet, not everybody on this planet goes back to Godhead, but those who are pure devotees of Krishna and so forth. But it's not a given just to be on Brahmaloka that you're going to go back to God. So, but there are thousands and millions of Brahmas and universes. So, take the position of Brahma, which is a very exalted position, responsible position. But still, we can become bewildered and attracted, and then come down from there, down, 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 even to insect body eventually. This is the amazing thing of the coverings that we can attain as living entities. So, the Bhagavatam was written wholly and solely to present the glories of Krishna and his expansions, all the avatars, how he comes to this planet and engages in his wonderful activities told in the 10th canto, all attractive, the supreme summum bonum of all of God's activities. Most attractive are by Krishna in Vrindavan Leela. That revelation is there. That's the heart of the book, the 10th canto. But also there's so much more. And all of it is giving us the same philosophy, slightly different ways. And that is the essence of which we've been given by the Goswamis following Lord Chaitanya. Nana Shastra Vajada Naikana Banosa Dharma Sangstapako. The first line of this wonderful Ashtaka about the Goswamis describes how, out of great mercy and compassion for all the fallen souls and following the instruction of Lord Chaitanya, they gleaned from all the different Shastras. Nana Shastra, the Vedas and the Upanishads and the Mahabharata and the Itihasas and all these different things. They were such great scholars, and they took the essence out of that and wrote their books such as the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Brihad Bhagavatamata, Laghu Bhagavatamata, Gopal Champu, all of them distilling the essence of the teachings of Lord Chaitanya and giving it to us in a form that, through Prabhupada's great efforts, we can read in our own language and practice and actually partake in. And so here, this episode of Bharat is fascinating. There are so many different dimensions. First of all, his very responsible position as the leader of all those 100 sons that Rishabdev had. He was given the responsibility to be the emperor, the king. He had most of his brothers helping them, being rulers of different parts of the kingdom. And 9 of them became the 9 Yogendras. I somehow have this special attraction to the 9 Yogendras. In the 11th canto, they come in wonderful teachings. Each one comes on the stage, so to speak. Maharaj Nimi is asking questions, and they give so much important information in a very short time, like 9 or 10 verses. They're giving a full lesson. And so that's also, the Rishabdev's sons and Bharat's brothers. But here, on these chapters, we're focusing on Bharat himself. And he doesn't go back to Godhead from Pula Ashram. We know that. He has to take birth as a deer because he's attracted to the fawn. He has a whole life as the fawn, as a deer. But he has a memory, just as the 2 Arjun trees. The Yamalarjun trees. You're singing the song every morning, right? They were bestowed with bhakti. Well, they were quite fallen. The sons of Kubera had become playboys, more or less, in the spiritual world. And Narada Muni blessed them with a curse. There's a blessing curse, right? Curse is you have to become trees for 35,000 years, but you'll be on that tract of land that eventually becomes the courtyard of Maharaj Nanda. So that eventually Krishna will come and release you from that tree bodies, and by that time you'll be purified. And they also had the memory, just like Bharata, they could remember, so they were purified. So these teachings of Bharat, they give us so much instruction about being a responsible king, and also being a very responsible renunciant. He carefully, he ran the kingdom for so long and in a very responsible way, then gave it over to his responsible sons, and took sannyas and went to Pula Ashram and started meditating. And he's meditating on Vasudeva, and he's meditating on the sun god Narayana and all of these things, and becoming more and more advanced and purified. And then even when he was, fallen, and he became so infatuated with this fawn, it's like there was no one else around, But here comes this fawn was so dependent on him, and evoked his natural compassion and love as a Vaishnava to help this living entity. But as I pointed out last time we dealt with this, he didn't have as a guru there to chastise him. He didn't have his god brothers who were saying, "What are you doing? Come with us. You got to get out of here. You're getting He was all alone. And so it became more and more, and the description is just incredible, how much he was attracted. All of that love that he developed for Krishna and that bhava and that ecstasy was redirected toward this fawn. And naturally he was thinking of the fawn at the time of death, and he became a deer. But then you have this whole other episode when he gets reborn as Jada Bharata. In that incarnation, he decided not to speak, to pretend to be stupid. Jada means stupid. And so that way he could just chant inside and meditate, and remember. So he was eventually kidnapped by some worshippers of Kali, the story. And they were going to offer him as an offering, And so he, just like Ambarish and all the greatest devotees, he just accepted it. And Prahlad, it's not like, Prahlad said, "Get out of here. I'm getting out of here." No, there's nothing like that. It's just whatever Krishna desires, right? We accept, which is a sign of tremendous advancement, detachment. So he was just waiting to be, decapitated, chanting Hare Krishna in his heart or whatever he's doing, meditating on the Lord. And Kali, who's after all a great devotee of Krishna, couldn't tolerate this, and so she expands to some of her other witches, or whatever, and they all decapitate all of the dacoits who were her own worshippers, to save the great devotee, Maharaja Jada Bharata. Anyway, it goes on, and then he has this wonderful interaction with this king, Rahugana. He hadn't spoken his whole life, but he could understand everything. And finally, when the opportunity arises to give some instruction to a king, which is so important, he starts speaking, and suddenly Rahugana, who was after all pious, he surrenders. He says, "Oh, this is a great soul. He's learned." And he gets off his palanquin, off his obeisance, and he starts asking questions. And the wonderful teachings to Jada Bharata are there in several chapters. The forest of enjoyment and so many other things. So this Bhagavatam is so rich. Remember what we've been through recently. We had the whole story of Paranjan. By the way, I wanted to mention, we have this great treasure that many of you must be who have been here for months realize, but some have not. One of our wonderful godbrothers just passed away here, Rajendranandana Prabhu, and I've been going back and I explored YouTube, and there's some very nice talks he gives on the Parakram, Navadvip Mandal Parakram, that you can explore on YouTube. And we have a whole channel, this San Diego channel, with all of his lectures he gave here. Now he was here for a year and 3/4 about, right? Since early 2020. And he was regularly giving classes. I don't know how many classes, there may be 60, 70, 80 classes of his. And they're all jewels, and you really, and just to by all appearances, he actually completed the course, that we can say. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there, my leg and whatever. But we've heard that, near the end there was this wonderful place. Jagadananda, who was his business partner. I didn't know him. He was there, and Rajandananda is lying there, and he says, "Why are there so many people in the room?" And it was just Jagadananda and Rajendranandana were actually there, visibly. But Rajendrananda was seeing, and who was he? And so he said, "Oh, what did he say? Are they the nice people, the good people?" In other words, these aren't the Yamadutas, right? He said, yes. So this is like, the Vishnu Dutas is somebody coming to take Raj home. And then at the end, he's chanting Krishna, Krishna, Hare Krishna. So there's the highest probability we can assume that he succeeded, that he completed the course. And we have a wonderful legacy, of course, his memory, but mostly his talks. You know, he had spent months every year in Mayapur for, I don't know, 20 years, 25 years. He would go there, would do business for 3/4 of the years, support his family, traveling all over and selling tchotchkes here and there. And then for at least 3 months out of the year, he would spend in Mayapur, Gopanim time, and then the Parakram, and all these different things. And he became very well known there for his talks. He would study. He was very studious. He began his career as a devotee in Gurukul, as a teacher in Dallas. And he taught in the school in Vrindavan. He was there when Prabhupada left his body. So it was very fortunate that we had this association, and we're very fortunate to have the record of his classes. We should take advantage of them. Everyone you see the sincerity and the erudition and devotion there. I just wanted to mention that. So, we've been given this great treasure by Srila Prabhupada. We should take advantage of it. This is one thing, when you get older, you realize every second counts, you know. In other words, you get more and more urgent. Don't waste any time. It's an illusion to think that we have all this time. There's one verse, I've been studying this, Kevalashtaka. Kevalashtaka is an 8-verse poem about the holy name that became, many of you may not know this, but one of Prabhupada's godbrothers, Krishna's Babaji, he was well known for his kirtans, for his laughter, for his wonderful advancement in devotional service, and affection for all the devotees, including Prabhupada's godbrothers, disciples. And he would weave in verses in a kirtan. He would be singing a kirtan, and then he would stop, and they would chant some nice shlokas and then begin the kirtan again. And some of the verses he would often chant from this Kevalashtaka. So the Kevalashtaka has this verse that made me think of, that I was thinking of. And one of the verses is, Nikshvase nehi vishvaso kadarudho bhavishyati kirtane matabharyad harinamaiva kevalam. All of the verses end with this line, Harinamaiva kevalam, from that famous verse, Harinama, Harinama, Harinamaiva kevalam. And so what this verse says is, remember that our final breath may come at any time, no matter if we're old and sick or in our youthful prime. So young and old alike should chant the name incessantly. The holy name of Shri Hari is surely all that be. So a few years ago, there was this article on dandabats.com, which I have the link to. I can send you if you're interested. And because for years, we never knew who wrote this. No one apparently did. That I don't think Krishna's Babaji would told anyone, or it would have come down. So it was always anonymous, you know. So someone had done was reading a Sajjana Toshini, published by Bhaktivinoda Thakur in the late 19th century. And this is a periodical he would publish for Vaishnavas. And there was a whole article about this Kevalashtaka and the author. And the author turns out to be Nilakanta Goswami, who was an associate of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur would, in his little article, he was addressing him as even Prabhupada, because he was apparently a descendant of either Advaita Acharya or Nityananda. Nityananda Bansha is known like that. And whereas some of them may have deviated a little bit, Nilakanta Goswami was very, very exalted Vaishnava. So it turns out that these 8 verses are part of a larger work, the Kevala Shataka. Shataka means 100. He wrote 100 verses in this format, all about the holy name. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur was giving a review, and he says, all of them are very wonderful, the sentiment is beautiful, and like he was just praising this prayer. And so I put it into a little poem, the 8 verses. But this verse stuck out. It came to mind, you know, that part of the symptom of bhava described, not the shivering and the crying and all of that, which is another type of symptom, of course, but the symptom in your behavior, you referred to these recently in one of your classes, is, for instance, great eagerness and taste for chanting the holy name. You know? And another one is, the one that's most important and practical to us to try to attain, not wasting any time. Avyakta kalatvam, right? Because this is what it's all about. Is that wasting time means willfully forgetting Krishna and doing something else, and thinking of something else related to whatever it may be, without understanding that relation to Krishna, willfully forgetting Krishna. It's like you want to know how we fell from the spiritual world? We experience it every day. When we willfully forget Krishna and absorb our mind in something else. That's exactly what falling means. Prabhupada describes falling from the spiritual world as like falling asleep. If anyone's interested in this topic, there's a letter he wrote. It's actually a paper he dictated to his secretary, and it's slightly edited. You can read it, and it's become to be known as the Crow and Tal letter. And Prabhupada, because this question would keep coming up, devotees would write to him, at least half a dozen during his 12 years of preaching in the West and around the world. And the question is, because we all know, you read Bhagavad Gita, and you find Yadgatvan Anavartante Tadama Paramangama, something equivalent. Going there, you never come back. Once you go to me, you never come back, right? So logically, well, okay, if we were there, why would he come down? Right? In other words, it's puzzling. So Prabhupada would always answer in the same way. That because Krishna has given us minute independence. Why? Because otherwise there's no question of love. In other words, what does Krishna want? He wants to enjoy these loving exchanges eternally. And he's doing that. He's God. He can make it happen. But in order to have loving exchanges, there has to be somebody with some independence on the other side. Otherwise, it's not love. It's something else. Prabhupada famously said, Krishna doesn't want us to love him at the point of a revolver. Love me or else. That's not love. He wants us to freely love him. That means we have the opportunity, we have the freedom not to love him. And that's called minute independence. So with that minute independence, we are all the ones who misuse that minute independence. Now we are distinctly in the minority, said to be like 1/4 of the jivas. Yes, the rest are in the spiritual world, Vaikuntha planets, different varieties, but way beyond the influence of the modes of nature, no birth, no death, in ecstasy, in bliss, eternity. So, how did we fall? We wanted to fall. There's even one exchange. This is quite amazing. Where Prabhupada said, Krishna tried to convince us not to go. He said, no, don't. It'll be too much suffering. And we were determined to try out being independent. So here we are. So then this material world is provided, but what is it really? It's really a place geared and under the guidance of Durga Devi, who's a servant of Krishna, but she's in the role of a stern prison guard, by which we're meant to learn that this is not our place, our home. It's not a place where we can have any kind of permanent happiness or security, and that we should want to return. But to get that, since we're covered over, we need intervention. We need Krishna's personally to come, which he does periodically, but very rarely, and to have his books like the Bhagavad Gita and his representatives who can teach us if we want that. To try to wake up from the illusion. So it is definitely a waking up. He says it's like falling asleep. And all of these lives we're living are like dreams. They're like the night dream that we have, which we're familiar with, where we may be someone else and be somewhere else and do something that we haven't done before and all kinds of things, and which we forget, is just, it has a similar reality quotient, the same reality to our daydream. This is also a dream. It may last longer. It may seem to have more, but ultimately it has no more substance than our night dream. Arte vidyamane pi sangsati nanavartate dhyayedo vishyana sa swapnena dagamo yata. This verse appears with slight variation 5 times in the Bhagavatam. 5 times. Therefore it's very important. And what it says is that in reality, arte avidyamane pi sangsati, the samsara, this birth to old age, these death, this cycle that we're living with all of her, is unreal, like a dream. And the samsara means the sufferings attendant to our being in this situation. But those sufferings do not cease. for those who are absorbed, meditating on the Vishayas, the object of the senses. This line appears in the Bhagavad Gita. Dhyayato Vishayan Asya. Just as swapne anartagamo yata, just as the sufferings in a nightmare don't cease until you wake up. You have to wake up from the dream and realize it's all a dream. I don't want any part of it. There's nothing that I want to try to remember or absorb my mind in there. That's very radical. Just like this line in the second chapter, first canto. Many of you know. The verse begins. Dharmak swanustitok pungsam vishakshena katasiyak notpadi yadidatim shamayevihi kevalam. This line alone, Prabhupada sometimes quote. Shamayevi it's just a lot of work for nothing, absolutely nothing. So whatever you do in this world, in this he's taking terms of varnashram dharma. In your varna, you're doing all the duties very nicely, but there's no bhakti. There's no increase of your desire to hear about Krishna. That's a measure of if you're progressing or not. So whatever you're doing that's decreasing that, or certainly not increasing it, it's simply hard labor for nothing. Is that radical or not? All of these big efforts to build this, do this, movements, it ultimately has no meaning. We have to be convinced of that. It's just this mode, this life, that life, dying, getting reborn, lower life, up. You're not going anywhere. You're just flailing around in the ocean of birth and death. Oh, I finally found a little rowboat. Now I'm successful. I'm still in the ocean, and the rowboat's leaking, but I'll be fine, No, there's no fine. So that understanding is prerequisite to our turning our attention to Krishna, practicing Krishna consciousness, one of which is hearing Srimad Bhagavatam and the association of devotees. This is our source of pramana. We've been studying the end of the 16th chapter, now the 17th chapter, now we're beginning 18th chapter in our evening class. I think we're just going to start tonight with the 18th, maybe the last verse of the 17th, and we'll move on to the 18th chapter. So there's a section of the 16th chapter that, I'm sorry, I'm going over, that at the very end, that gives so much essential instruction. Krishna is describing what happens to the demons, those who are arch enemies of God, who simply are concerned with their own aggrandizement and torturing others. It's horrible. So he says, this is they go to hell. I send them to hell, and there's three gates leading to hell. Trivadam narakasedam, dwaram nashanam atmana, kama, krodha, tata lobha, tasmareta trayam. There are three gates leading to this hell I just described: lust, anger, and greed. Now, lust means more than just sex desire, unrestrained sex desire. It means anything that you want to enjoy in this material world without relation to Krishna. Subtle, mode of goodness, passion, or ignorance. It's all within that lust. But if you're if you're really into it, then that leads to anger when it's frustrated, isn't it? And if you happen to succeed, then you become greedy for more and more. So lust is the key. That's the beginning. Desire is separate from Krishna. And that leads to greed and anger, which are the three gates leading to hell. Become a demon. So Krishna says. So, what is it? The English. Those who have escaped these three gates perform activities of Shreya for their ultimate good. And they ultimately achieve the highest goal. So this is the two poles of the destination of the soul. And then he goes back and he says, Yak shastra vidamutsujya vartate kamakata nasa siddham avapnoti nasukam naparam gatim. So right here, after a long disquisition on the qualities of the demons, he reintroduces the idea of Shastra. Shastra is essential. Prabhupada dedicated his life to living Shastra and giving Shastra. Basically, that's what he's doing. That's an acharya. Shastra being genuine, bona fide, revealed scriptures. Krishna's words and those who are repeating his words and giving them in such a way that we can understand. So, those who reject the vidhis, the instructions of Shastra, utsrija, back to the demons again, Shastra vidam utsrija, vartate kamakara, they remain acting on the impulse of lust. because we're living entities. We have to interact with this world. Kama karana. And such persons, they don't achieve perfection. They don't achieve happiness. What to speak about the ultimate goal? So now comes this very stark choice. There's this Western philosopher called Kierkegaard. Either or. He was a strict Christian, and either you're going to obey, God, Christ, or you're going to go to hell. So Christian, it gives a similar thing. Either you're going to come under the sway of your lower self and stay bound up and have all kinds of suffering, or you're going to find out genuine Shastra, hear it, and try to integrate it into your life. And so the last verse of the chapter, he brings it home, again with Shastra. Tasmat, he's there for verses, probably he would always emphasize. Tasmat Shastra Pramanam te karya bhavastito gyatva Shastra vadanoktam karma karta miharasi. The whole movement is based on this verse practically. Therefore, one should accept Shastra as one's pramana for what to do and what not to do in life, the guide. And then he kind of brings it completely home. And one shouldn't just read Shastra and understand it, but one should actually take it within oneself and do those things that Shastra recommends as a matter of duty, and refrain from those things that Shastra prohibits as a matter of duty. In other words, you have to have it as a matter of duty, because you're not spontaneously attracted to do that. That's your whole disease. So you have this idea of duty, accepting a higher authority and doing it for the benefit of yourself and all others. So that's Prabhupada's theme song practically, for how he lived his life and he spread Krishna consciousness. And it should be ours. We should study these books. We should, of course, attend the classes, study on our own. The Bhakti Shastri Prabhupada and all these other Shastris that he, courses, different advancements, so that we know these books inside and out, and we can not only live our lives according to them, but convince others to do so. That's the Hare Krishna movement. And we're giving this whole episode of Bharat Maharaj, very, very instructive. And we're very fortunate to be able to hear from Srila Prabhupada on this subject. Any discussion on these points?
Hare Krishna.
Haribol. Who's that? I've been away.
This is Vijaya Krishna Das Prabhu.
Oh, okay. You have a question? Go ahead, Prabhu.
Yes, I have a question. May I?
Go ahead.
Prabhu, the quote related to the verse you chose for today, 5:7:14, I find in the translation, quote, "The Lord has created this universe from his own spiritual potency," end quote. So, Prabhu, for the Lord, because he is supremely potent and supremely creative, it is possible for him to create this universe and other universe even bigger than this one. In relation to, and also he is the supreme spiritual being. So my question is related to me being his part and parcel, a spiritual particle of his supreme, of the supreme spiritual being that he is.
Okay.
In relation to being creative, the Lord, because he's supremely creative, he can create a universe. What about me? What about the good use of my creativity? Being a part and parcel, a spiritual particle, how far should I go in relation to making good use of my spiritual creativity?
There's practically infinite room in the Krishna consciousness movement, Gaudiya Vaishnavism, for creativity. I'm just thinking of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, so many pioneering, processes he had. Some of you may not know, he had these tremendous fairs that he would put on. This whole diorama exhibition we have in LA. Many of you have seen it, what they used to call the Fate Museum. What do they call it now? What is it? Bhagavad Gita tour. So that was inspired by Bhakti Siddhanta's fairs that he would come. So many dioramas depicting Lord Chaitanya's Leela, Krishna's Leela, you see, that devotees could stand by and people would come by and, you know, you could preach to them, you know, and it's a visual element that's arresting. And plus he would have all kinds of other things that would attract people's attention, you know. And this was unheard of. This was unique. This was, you know, revolutionary. Srila Prabhupada, I'm thinking of some of the creative, when Vishnu Jan Swami, the famous Vishnu Jan, he started putting on these puppet shows in L.A. or San Francisco, I guess it was L.A. I don't know where he started. But it was fascinating. You can imagine going out on the street and having a little stage, and suddenly there's puppets, and naturally people are going, what is this, you know? And he was doing it very well. He had other devotees, you know. We had people join who were, I remember in New York, we had 2 professional actors join the temple as devotees. Oh boy, did our place take off after that. Brasagya and her husband, I forget his name now, Loitaksha. So there's tremendous room for creativity in glorifying Krishna. We find a lot of that creativity on the altar with the dressing of the Lord. We may not notice all of the different nuances, but that's exactly one of the outlets. All of this painting, music, you know, there's room for that. There's so much that can be done. What to speak of in the kitchen. Now, don't get, you know, there's recipes, but there's ways of tweaking them if you know what you're doing, so that you can have an infinite variety of, you know, Bhogat for Krishna for his pleasure. The idea is that we are, as you mentioned, we're part and parcel of Krishna. Therefore, we have his creative aspect to a minute degree, and when we use that in his service for glorification, that's very pleasing, you know. All of this music, I mean, the highly developed music and art and, you know, in the culture that we see. And that's all part of the, you know, reflective of the spiritual world. There's a constant concert going on there, you know. Even when Krishna's going into the forest, his friends are singing and he's dancing. Sometimes they're playing the flutes, you know. And then the peacocks, they're dancing, and the bees are singing. Nobody's out of tune there, by the way. And perfect intonation. And then, you know, Krishna's doing the rasa dance. The Gandharvas get into it, right? They're playing the drums and they're dancing and showers of flowers, you know. So all of that is creativity, and there's infinite room for it. So, and naturally, you know, it can be perverted in our own, you know, in what we see around us. There's so much creativity, but it's being misused. Shramevi kevalam. So there's plenty of opportunity for that, Prabhu.
Yes, Dravida Prabhu, if I may, why is it that you are not mentioning your poetry?
Because it's kind of third class.
I find it a very, very excellent example related to how creative a devotee can become in relation to glorifying Lord Krishna. Your poetry is amazing, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. I don't think it's amazing. I think it's pretty pedestrian, but I appreciate that.
No, I disagree completely.
Anyway, that is certainly Prabhupada wanted us to write. Prabhupada wanted us to write, and writing is a creative thing. You know, there's a wonderful Lord Chaitanya Charan. He has polio; he can hardly walk, but he writes so many articles. He's written so many books, you know, and does so many Zoom classes, and it gives pleasure to all the devotees. You know, a wonderful preacher. Okay, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Hare Bol, glories to Prabhupada.